Hi, welcome to the Signal Path. Check out this latest dumpster find. This is the SpectraScan 670, and as the name suggests, it's some kind of a spectrometer. But it is built very much like a camera. It does have a lens in the front, which is replaceable and adjustable, and it also has an eyepiece so you can look at the scene. It does have a display here in the back, a nice LCD display, which I think is also a touch screen, a bunch of controls, a measure button over here, and a handlebar and everything. It does have a built-in battery. I don't know if it works or not, but based on what I find online, this is used for things like calibrating displays and LEDs and light fixtures, essentially for photo research. And it should give us a nice spectrum view of what we are looking at, among other things like light intensity and a whole bunch of other kinds of measurement. That is if it works, of course. Now, given that we found this in the dumpster, first thing first, let's take it apart and see how it works, understand the principal operation, and then maybe do some experiment with it. Let's go. And removing the top cover is pretty straightforward, and looking at this, they certainly haven't gone out of their way to making this thing compact. It is laid out nice and flat and very easy to explore. The light enters over here through this removable lens. This is going to give you the magnification, the field of view, and of course the focusing ring that is built into the lens itself. Right behind it, in this cavity, is an optical beam splitter. This is going to split the light into two paths. One path goes down this way, and that's going to go through the eyepiece. So you can actually look exactly at what the scene is seeing. The other side is going to couple into the spectrometer itself. And this is done usually with a prism or maybe a mirror that splits the light. Now, the ratio in which it divides the light is going to depend on the design parameters. If you, for example, divide it 50-50, you're going to get a nice bright view of the scene. At the same time, you're going to lose half the power that's going to go into the spectrometer. And that's going to affect the signal-to-noise ratio for very dark scenes, which you can overcome with some integration. But that's essentially what they have to decide. I think something like this probably just 50-50. But in some really sensitive situations, they maybe couple 90% of the light into the actual detector. Now, right after that, in this little section over here is a shutter. That shutter allows you to completely close the light, disabling any light arriving at the spectrometer. And that's because you want to measure the dark current. These are solid-state detectors. But more importantly, these are arrays of detectors, a linear array. And that means some of the pixels might be stuck high. And if you don't measure that, you're going to get these spikes and these false values into your spectrum that you're measuring. By closing this, you first make the dark measurement, and all the hot pixels can be subtracted, and then you will measure the actual scene. Very common technique as well. There's also a shutter over here. This shutter closes the light arriving at the eyepiece, but in reality what it's doing is it is preventing any backlight coming this way and then potentially coupling into the spectrometer and then giving you false value, because you only want to see what's coming through the front lens, the scene that you're looking at. And that's nice touch that they have that over here. There's also another motor over here. I'm actually not sure what that does. It seems to couple something in here, maybe some potentially changing the field of view or maybe some blocking. I'm not sure. Maybe that's, there's some hint in it in the software. But the shutter is also, of course, motorized. This section over here is a compartment for the battery. There's an embedded controller PC over here. This is going to the LCD screen in the front of the unit, so we'll see it hopefully if it works, and we should be able to analyze that. And the rest of it is just DC-DC converters, electronics, interfaces, USB, and so on. So not very complicated overall, but it's a nice design, and because it's laid out so nicely, we can actually find out exactly how it works. Let's see if we can dig a little bit deeper into how this thing is built. So now I've gone ahead and removed the top cover of this little spectrometer section over here so we can see what's on the inside, and it's one of the simplest implementation I've ever seen, which makes it really easy to explore. So the light coming over here, this is where the shutter is, couples into the fiber, and that fiber loops around and then shines the light inside of this cavity. Now normally these cavities are very difficult to film because the inside is purposely really dark and absorbs as much light as possible. It's because you don't want stray light bouncing around this cavity. Because of how this works, this relies on the angle of arrival of the light to determine the exact wavelength. And if you have a lot of stray light, you're just going to get spectral lines where they shouldn't be. So it's very important for light to be fully absorbed. But this is a Tagarno T50. Let's go ahead and adjust the actual exposure. That's going to give us a bit more insight so we can see a better what's going on inside of the cavity. There we go. So the light coming over here first shines and hits this surface. That's a concave mirror. You can see it right there. There's our mirror right there. And that mirror is going to reflect that and then project that incoming light onto the surface of this other mirror, the one that here that's on an angle. This is now a diffraction mirror. Now, we've talked about diffraction mirrors on the channel many times before. These mirrors have very finely spaced lines which are well controlled. They're proportional to the wavelength of the light itself. And because of that, once the light hits it, they're going to have constructive and destructive interference, and depending on the wavelength, it's going to have a different diffraction angle coming off the mirror. Basically, it's a Fourier transform of light in space. It separates the wavelength and spreads them across a certain distance. And translating a compounded light into that, then now can be measuring the spectrum, which is a pretty powerful idea. Now, not to mistake this with a prism. A prism also separates wavelengths in spatial domain, but it does that in a very different way. It uses index of refraction to change the angle of the light that comes out. Even though the result is very similar, the principal operation is completely different. So these diffraction mirrors are really popular because you can control the line widths and spacing very precisely, and therefore you can predict exactly how the light spreads across space. So now the compounded light, once it's bounced off of this and bounced off of the surface, is now spread across distance. And then it bounces once again back off of this, and then it goes into a linear detector. And that linear detector, let me see if I can get the light in there a little bit. It's a very bright light. There you go. That little slit that you see over there, that's where the light enters. And actually you can see the pins of the detector right through here. There it is. Those are the pins of the detector. And look at that. You see, the flashlight is actually being decomposed directly inside. And that's the diffraction mirror actually working. So you can see it live happening. Now, this is, of course, not how this is going to happen because the light is coming from this angle from the top. But the principle is the same. So then this detector, I'm not sure exactly how many detectors this one has. I think maybe 256 or so. It's not that much. It's a really small detector. And the slit you can see is so short. And there's a little bit of a window in here to block any other stray light. Now, for situations where the wavelength is really broad, you actually have to have filters in front of this because you get aliasing of light superimposed on the same parts of the detector, and the only way to know what wavelength was what, in order to avoid the aliasing, you need to put filters. It gets more and more complicated, of course. But yeah, a really simple structure for this to be able to measure wavelength. All right, let's put it back together. Hopefully it works. And before I forget, this is the back of the display. The little ribbon cable that you saw plugs directly into this, and the embedded controller on the device itself just drives this. It does have a Xilinx processor on it, so pretty complicated for this purpose. A bunch of DC-DC converters. Nothing unusual. Display on the other side does have a touch screen, and this thing is nothing more than just a single button. So all of this complexity for one button probably has more than one purpose in other versions of this instrument. But yeah, that's about it. Well, the unit does power on with an external 12-volt adapter, and it seems to go through its self-test just fine. Now, if you go through the menus, we discover some really interesting parameters that you can adjust. In particular, under the instrument setup, there is this aperture parameter. This also demystifies what that second motor was for. It was adjusting this exact field of view. So you can adjust it all the way down to 0.125 degrees, which is tiny. And it goes, I think, in steps of double, that 0.25, and then 0.5, and then up to 1 degree. So what this does is that even though the lens sees a wide field of view when you're looking at a lot of different sources of light, this limits the part of the scene that can arrive at the spectrometer to a very narrow field, in this case 1 degree. So you could be really far away from a display, and you can actually move that around and only calibrate or look at the spectral content on a very small area of the entire scene. That's probably the strength of something like this, because you can move it around and, of course, calibrate different areas of a display, whether it's an LED display or maybe different lights. This means that if there are a lot of different sources of light around, you don't see that, and the spectrometer only sees whatever is in the center of the display. In fact, if you look through the eye hole, which is very hard to film, there's a little disc in the middle that tells you what is the field of view, and that changes, the size of that actually changes depending on what aperture you select. So that's a pretty neat thing. Let's set up something that takes advantage of that and see if it works. And this is what I'm thinking of using. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of RGB LEDs over here. This is directly pointing at it, but I have placed the field of view to only focus on this center one. I can change the color of these by pressing them. So you can see you can individually change the colors, which is pretty neat. And then you can cycle through all the way back to red. So if this is working, even though there are all these other spectral contents around, we're only looking at the red one for the first test. We should only see the red spectrum for this one. If that's working, we can cycle through the colors and try different ones and see if it works. But that's going to be a tough test for this because of all the other pollutions that are in the scene. And check out this crazy thing. If you want to know what it is and what I'm going to do with it, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. But this is pretty cool. Alright, so even though all the LEDs are on, I'm focused only in the center LED, which is currently red. Let's see if it actually measures that. I'm going to push the measure button. There you go. It's doing some dark measurement first. And let's see, and look at that. It's ignoring all the other LEDs and only the one that I am looking at in the middle because of the field of view. That's really cool. And that's exactly the color, of course, we see. It says that the peak is at 628 nanometer. That's the red color. All right, that's pretty exciting. So let's go ahead and change that. I'm going to change that color now to orange. Now with orange, it must be mixing two different colors of two different LEDs. Let's do another measurement now. So now the center LED is in orange, at least to my eyes. And look at that. Yes, there is some additional yellow light and there's some additional green light that makes it look orange. Very cool. All right, let's change that again. Now I made it yellow, so now there should be even more green. Let's do another measurement. Let's see, the weight of this should now increase. And let's see what that looks like. Yes, it does. That's really cool. The fact that I am ignoring all the other lights and only looking at that center one is a pretty powerful tool. There you go. This is now purely green. So we should see a lot of green now over here, and this should almost entirely disappear. There it is. Yep, that is correct. And the next color is, this is now blue. We should now see more content in this region of the display. Let's see if that is correct. Indeed, that is also correct. And the next color that this can do is purple, which is mixing red and blue. So we should now see more spectral content over here while maintaining the blue as well. We should see two tones, and that's exactly right. That's really cool. And here's the white, which should be all of them combined. There we go. We should see now 3 individual peaks of the 3 LEDs. Yeah, there it is. That's really cool. I didn't expect something from the trash can could be so fun to play with. But yeah, very powerful, and you can of course now point to different things and look at the spectral content in a really narrow field. I don't think I've ever seen something like this. I'm sure people who are in this field have used instruments like this all the time, but that's pretty exciting. And while we're here, let's do one other experiment. What I have here is a glass tube filled with high purity mercury gas. Now we can excite that and it's going to emit some light associated particularly with the mercury element itself. This is a very classic experiment. Now depending on the vapor pressure inside, it's going to also emit a certain wavelength of UV light. And that can be quite dangerous for your eyes. I actually don't know what the vapor pressure of this particular lamp is, but when I do turn it on, there is some smell of ozone, so you have to be careful, and I'm wearing goggles. So let's go and turn it on. And there it is, and you can see that's really classic characteristic of the light coming out of this type of mercury gas tube. And we can go ahead and use the spectrometer and see if we see these distinct lines associated with this element. Okay, let's see if we can catch those mercury lines over here. Let's measure that and check it out. Yeah, indeed, we do have these distinct lines. That's exactly what a mercury lamp should look like. These should have a little bit higher relative values towards the 740 nanometer or so, but I think I might be blowing out the sensor. I think it's probably maybe too bright for what we're trying to do. It's too close to it. It's only measuring 22 milliseconds. But yeah, that's exactly what you should see for a mercury lamp. So you can imagine in situations with street lamps and other things, something like this could be used to calibrate or find out if various types of lamps are failing. For example, high pressure sodium lamps that have to have a certain spectral broadening when the pressure goes up. You can actually check to see if they're healthy, even without having to climb up there by just looking at their spectrum. Very cool stuff. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. There's something really rewarding about picking up a piece of trash and turning it into an opportunity of experimentation and learning. I hope you also enjoyed this as much as I did. As always, if you want to support the channel, it's really easy through PayPal and Patreon. It really goes a long way and always goes back to the lab. As always, I'll see you in the comment section.